that we do every Friday and Saturday. Fridays at 6 and Saturdays at 3 p.m. Eastern. We are in the Friendly Neighborhood History Studio as I look for a good background to use. And we are live broadcasting, answering all of your questions about history and social studies for the next hour or so. So yeah, please like and subscribe if you enjoy all different types of history. Check out all the long, short, and live content that we have available for you here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. We also have a TikTok, Instagram, and Patreon where there is more content available. And if you really want extra content, bonus features, you can become a member and get early access and bonus videos as well. So that's available to you all. I'm going to put the ruins of Pompeii and Mount Vesuvius in the background. I think that's a very appropriate historical background. And yeah, so for the next hour or so, we'll be answering all of your questions about history and social sciences as we do every Friday and Saturday. And then tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern, we will be doing our live stream lecture on a particular historical topic, one that you can vote on. There's several different choices, including France in the 1600s. We've got the Roaring Twenties. So yeah, go check that out and vote on the topic you would like me to discuss in our live stream lecture, which is usually Sundays at 4, but will be at 5 o'clock tomorrow. Following that, at 6 o'clock, there will be a members-only Q&A. So if you want more in-depth, more private discussion, smaller crowd, so more room to navigate, more in-depth topics and discussion with me about history and social studies, become a member, and you can join us for our members-only Q&A that we do once a month, and that'll be tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern for the month of March. So. I'm glad you're eating lunch with your friends. Thank you, Faraz, for joining us. Tell your friends to like and subscribe. It's great to see you. Emir is here. He's got an emoji next to him because he is a member. So if you become a member, not only can you join our members Q&A tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern at following the live stream lecture. So I'll be live streaming for 2 hours for my members and one for the general audience. You also get a list of historical emojis you can have next to your name. And hello, Gayahan. Good to see you. Gayahan was a member. Hopefully he will be again someday, but we'll see about that. Anyways, questions, topics. What would you like to discuss regarding history and social sciences? Again, we do this every Friday and Saturday. Fridays at 6, Saturdays at 3, and then Sundays at 4 is the live stream lecture. We'll be doing an extra bonus one on Easter Monday, it looks like. I think at 3 p.m. or maybe something like that. I don't know exactly, but we will be doing extra live streams next weekend as everybody celebrates Easter. So next Sunday live stream will obviously be about next Sunday's live stream lecture will obviously be about the history of Easter. So join us for that. I hope you all will enjoy that. I've got a video about Easter that'll be coming out. Yeah. So, anyways, this is the Friendly Neighborhood History channel where we do history in a friendly, neighborly manner 24/7, 365 or 366 days a year. You're in the Friendly Neighborhood History studio with me, and we are answering questions today like we do every Friday and Saturday. Hopefully, everybody's having a good weekend, and we really appreciate you choosing to share it with us. Let me know if my microphone and video is coming in good. If not, I can maybe change things around, but I did fix the lighting issue I was having yesterday, so I'm really glad about that. And I'm excited to talk about history and social studies with all of you for the next hour or so. Let me get my other light over here. Okay, there we are. So, yeah, questions about history and social studies. What do you guys want to talk about? What do you want to discuss? Can everybody hear and see me okay? Again, can everybody see and hear me all right? We've been doing these live streams for almost 2 years. We've been doing the channel for over 2 years now. So, really excited for everything that we've got this year. The goal is to get to 20,000 subscribers by the end of the year. People who check out short form content, long form content, lives. We get tons of subscribers all over the place. Thank you, Patrick. Patrick's a longtime Friendly Neighborhood historian. He goes back to the early days of the channel. And I know 2 years doesn't sound like a lot, but in terms of YouTube and content creation, it is a huge amount of time. The channel has changed so much from the earliest videos. Um, and Vitamin, great to see you. Hello. Thank you for saying hi, Faraz. What do we want to talk about? What questions do we have about history and social studies? As we're about 1/12 of the way there. We'll be going about an hour, maybe a little bit longer. We got a little bit of a later start today, but that's okay. We started early on Friday, so that makes up for it. We went an hour yesterday. Can you talk a bit about the development of scriptural canon by the Second Temple era? Who was using the Hebrew translations? Who was using the Greek Septuagint? Well, this is more almost a theological, spiritual question, religious question than it is a historical one. But basically, Second Temple Judaism during that period of the second Jewish temple is built by refugees who are allowed to return from their captivity in Babylon and Persia by the Persian Emperor Cyrus the Great in the 6th century. They rebuild the Jewish temple, and this is where we get Second Temple Judaism. Second Temple Judaism develops some of the famous forms of Judaism known about in the New Testament, such as the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Of course, the Greeks come with Alexander the Great conquering Palestine and destroying the Persian Empire in the 4th century. And because of this, you're going to see a development of um, new and a new or influence. Hellenization spreads all over the world. So you have a development of Greek philosophy, literature, culture, politics, religion, influencing basically all parts of the ancient Near East and the Middle East. And so the ancient world is going to come under the heavy sway and influence of Greek culture, Greek philosophy, and the Greek language is going to become the lingua franca of a culture as Alexander's successors divide up the land. So the Septuagint is a translation of the Hebrew Old Testament that is written in Greek by 70, that's where we get Septuagint from, rabbis in, I think, the 3rd century BC, and it becomes the popular standard King James Bible of its day, especially during the time of the apostles in the New Testament. So let's talk about the story of St. Thomas and how he ended up in India. Well, that's according to Christian legend. St. Thomas was the doubter, as he's known, supposedly, according to Eusebius and early church traditions, which aren't verifiable and do not have archaeological or historical corroboration to them, ends up in India, where he is martyred, sharing the Christian faith there and establishing a Christian church that ties itself back to India in the ancient times. What about the history of Asians? What planet do we come from? The world, this one. Um, so yeah, other questions about history and social studies. If you liked what I just talked about, consider subscribing and becoming a friendly neighborhood historian. Um, let's see here. What do we want to talk about? What questions do we have today is what I'm wondering. So yeah, Gaihan asked a good question. Vitamin asked one good question, then he asked one really weird question. So I don't know what his whole game is, but yeah, what do we want to discuss today on the Friendly Neighborhood History channel? Again, we have our live stream lecture tomorrow at 5, followed by our Q&A for members only tomorrow at 6. So if you become a member, that should help you out. How do you pronounce koine? Koine. Yeah. Can you talk about the parallels to things going on now compared to 1930s Germany? What are you referring to when you say things compared to 1930s Germany? Everybody thinks that their political opponents is Nazis. That's just how modern politics works. Um, a lot of people believe in the modern context that what's happening with ICE and things like that is comparable to Nazi Germany and the Gestapo and things like that. And that just tells you more about their politics than it tells you about what the Nazis did or what ICE is doing. Um, Immigration and customs enforcement, for all of its controversy and all that can be talked about, I don't want to give my political opinion. I'm not a politician. I'm a historian talking about historical issues. My job is to discuss historical issues. Um, so, my point is that the uh, yeah, I'm not going to talk about the politics of what's happening with ICE and things like that. I don't necessarily see the parallels. I think everybody wants to see the parallels and make the parallels to make a political point that may or may not be true. ICE is dealing with immigration issues. Obviously, the issue of a Gestapo was dealing with anyone who criticized and opposed the Nazi regime, as well as, of course, a crackdown in which they would gather and round up and persecute the Jews. YouTube verify system. This is the live. Oh, for goodness sake, Big Mike. Yes, we get it. I'm talking about the way Hitler got everyone to hate the Jews, the way Trump is getting people to hate immigrants. Do you see a parallel? No, no. There is definitely a cult of personality that Hitler had, that Trump has, that many politicians and political leaders have had for a long time. The idea of making Germany great and restoring it to its proper level of power and glory is definitely within the Nazi uh, lexicon, and of course, restoring America to the greatness of its past is within the American and MAGA lexicon. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're exactly the same thing or they're doing the same things. Uh, yeah, I don't want to talk about ICE. I don't want to talk. I don't necessarily see a parallel. Demonization of political opponents is common. So yeah, I don't know what to say about that. And demonization of for political points, hating groups. It's this isn't there. If you see parallels, there are parallels, but they are not necessarily parallels that are non-existent in other forms. Wanting to improve your country's lot and thinking that it's been fallen on hard times and needs to be made great again isn't something that is exclusively Nazis or this. So, um, yeah. Well, I don't necessarily see it. If you want me to go more in depth, consider giving a super chat. I don't like to discuss political issues unless they are um, re- uh, explicitly historical. And if I do discuss them, I'm going to discuss them in a historical manner. I don't share my political opinions or beliefs. It's just not what I do. Um, yeah, it'd be nice to find a Noah's Ark, but that's probably not going to happen. I mean, there is a Mount Ararat that is in Turkey, but there hasn't been any ever. There's never been any real way that they have been able to discover or find Mount Ararat in Turkey. So, um, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. There is plenty of historical evidence that has seemingly confirmed some of the biblical narrative, but nothing has ever verified it verbatim or any of the claims. And many of the claims are quite outrageous and over the top, and you can't actually get historical verification for them. You can't get a historical verification for the resurrection of Jesus. And I'm not saying this because I hate Christians or because I'm not one necessarily. I don't share my religious perspective or beliefs. My issue is as a historian, I cannot say that all of the events that are claimed to be historical narrative in the Bible are actually historical narratives. The same thing I do with the Quran. I have to be consistent here. Did Jesus like to swim in the ocean or on the coast? I mean, wouldn't he prefer just to walk on the water? I mean, if you could walk on the water, you probably want to do that instead of necessarily swim. What history do you specialize in? I am a Russian historian in specificity, and in general, I am a European historian of the last few centuries. So I study various different types of history all across the world, and I'd like to think that I can talk about any type of history from any era and any period and place without knowing everything about every single event that happened or every single leader or every single this or that. But I am able to talk some sense about most history in most different parts of the world at different times. That doesn't necessarily make me an expert, but it does mean that I know a decent amount about the history of these areas of the world. So, yeah, other questions about history or social studies, please drop them in the chat. A topic you want to discuss, any part of the world, any time period, I'd be happy to discuss it with you. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. As I take a sip of my Starbucks, I'm not sponsored by Starbucks, but it's nice to have some coffee to give me the energy to go through my live stream. What else do we want to discuss? What other questions or topics do we have? What is your favorite events to teach people about from your area of expertise? The Russian Revolution. Go back and watch my live stream lectures or my long form videos on it. I find it a particularly fascinating series of events that led to a Russian Revolution, and its aftermath is quite chaotic and quite impactful. Um, One of the most underrated historical events in all of history. This is not a fake back. Well, it's fake in the sense that I'm not actually at Mount Vesuvius, but this is a real picture of Mount Vesuvius. Yes, I use a background. So what? My uncle went to Moscow in the early 70s. He claimed he saw a person in Lenin's tomb getting right full butt for sneezing. This sounds about right. Lenin never wanted to be deified or glorified or venerated, but he was embalmed, which he didn't want, and put on display in Moscow in the Kremlin for people to come and idolize him as a tribute to him by Stalin after Stalin took power over the Soviet Union. And this was all an implicit way of Stalin claiming that Lenin validated his regime, which isn't necessarily true. No, I don't think he's there anymore. Um, but yeah, Yes, it's a faith background. What do you want? Do you want a real background? You want me to actually be there right now? Give me a giant super chat and maybe I can afford a plane ticket. History of Czechoslovakia? Well, Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic, is a combination, it is a portmanteau of Czechs and Slovaks. And those are two different peoples that inhabited that area of Central and North and Southeastern Europe, the Balkans, during the last few centuries. The Czech people are historically referred to as the Bohemians. Um, and Bohemia was part of the Holy Roman Empire for a long time. And the modern state of Czechoslovakia, I'm trying to remember the name of its first president. He was a writer and a philosopher, but it was kind of created as a in the wake of the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. At the end of the Great War in 1918, what I call World War II, and you probably believe is World War I, the Allies decided to give self-determination to the different ethnic groups within Europe. Now, some of these got smushed together into Yugoslavia. The Czechs and the Slovaks came together in Czechoslovakia, and this was had been part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but now was free to determine its own future as a political organization. Eventually, Czechoslovakia was taken over by the communists and became well, of course, Czechoslovakia plays an integral role in the lead up to the next World War, as you have the annexation of the Sudetenland and the taking of all of Czechoslovakia by Hitler and his goons. And then, of course, later on, you have the Soviets liberating it, if you want to even call it that, from the hand of the Nazi Germans. And then, of course, it became a place where communism was established as a puppet state of the Soviet Union and became one of the many satellites in Eastern Europe, part of the Iron Curtain, during the late 40s and early 50s, which would later form the Warsaw Pact and be an integral ally to the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Alexander Dubček in 1968 tried to reform the socialism in his country, providing more political and economic freedoms for the people. This almost led to an all-out revolution that would have overthrown Czechoslovakia had the Soviet Union under Leonid Brezhnev not sent in a bunch of tanks to basically crush any opposition. Eventually, a group of revolutionaries who were more of the artsy fartsy community, which would be very appropriate for the term Bohemian derives from ancient Bohemia, basically decided to uh, stage political protests. Some of them were arrested, some of them were oppressed, to try to demand the freedom of their people from the Soviet Union. And this led to what's called the Velvet Revolution, which eventually, due to the loosening hold by Mikhail Gorbachev and the Soviet Union, allowed Czechoslovakia to become an independent country and eventually dissemble into the Czech Republic and Slovakia, which are their modern states today. So there you go. Czechoslovakia is quite a fascinating place. The Czechs are interesting. The Slovaks are interesting. Their role in the history of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, the 30 Years' War, things like that. Quite impressive. And Dubček is a pretty great name. Is Putin Slavic? I mean, most Russians are Slavic, or at least consider themselves to be Slavic. What you think about Israel wanting to take, and thank you so much for the super chat. I really, really appreciate that, Ceramics. You are really, really great. Is there something you would like me to discuss? Um, and so the Well, thank you so much, Rufto. I'm so glad you found it. Goat, great to see you. Thank you for joining us from Greece. We talk a lot about Greek history here all the time. What do you think about Israel wanting to take Lebanon now and ordering those people to leave this land? Um, I don't want to talk about Israel. I talk about it all the time. Go and watch my live stream lecture from 2 Sundays ago. I finally put this issue to bed. I do not talk about the issues in Israel anymore. People have asked me about it way too much. I do not talk about the issues surrounding the Jewish people. If you want me to actually talk about geopolitical issues, give me a super chat. I'm not going to talk about it because it's not historical. I can give you a geopolitical or political analysis from a historical perspective, but I'm not doing that for free. I'm tired of people commandeering my channel and trying to take over it because they have some sort of obsession with a very small strip of land that is extraordinarily far from where they live, and and a certain group of people that is a vast minority of the world's population. So none of that. Um, Anyways, other questions about history or social studies and ceramics. If you have a particular topic you would like me to go in depth about or do a deep dive, please consider. Please think about it because you gave a super chat and you deserve that. Greek government is silent regarding the Orthodox and Maronites asking intervention or asylum into Greece. I don't know a lot about that right now. The Maronites and what do you mean the Orthodox and Maronites asking intervention or asylum into Greece. Are there groups of people fleeing from other parts of the world, like the Middle East, who want to live in Greece, and they obviously have a connection because they're part of the Orthodox Church? Where's the smoking jacket? This stream is not the same without it. That's true. I could put it on if you all will give me a minute. I could change into it. I just kind of wanted to get onto the live stream and start answering questions, Mantha, but I could. If you guys want me to, I can put on my traditional smoking jacket, my dressing gown that I wear. It's either that or I'm in a shirt and tie. We do formal wear here in the Friendly Neighborhood History Studio in our channel. No, I'm not deporting anybody here, Chris. This is a free space to talk about history and social studies. This is happening in Syria due to Orthodox Easter celebrations. They were attacked by militants. Oh, that makes sense. There's a lot of upheaval there. Are those the Druzes and all of the stuff going on? I'm sorry to hear that. I will ask about Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky or Rachmaninoff if you know about them. Yes, I know quite a great deal about each of them. In fact, today is the death anniversary. I do daily born, died, and daily event videos every single day of the year. Today is the death anniversary of Sergei Rachmaninoff, right after his 70th birthday in 1943. Rachmaninoff is considered the greatest pianist of all time. Became one of the leading piano players and composers in Russia at the turn of the 20th century, and then, of course, even into the revolutionary and post-revolutionary Soviet era. I don't know what he felt about the regime change or anything like that. I don't know a lot about his political philosophy. Of course, I think Tchaikovsky is the greatest composer of all time. I would put him above Mozart, Bach, and Beethoven, although I love all of them. I love classical music. In fact, when I do videos, I probably should start playing public domain classical music because it's really nice to listen to and it's a good background. So that would be a fun thing to start integrating into the channel. Um, but yeah, let me see. What I was going to say is that, yeah, Tchaikovsky is obviously known for his ballets, and the Russians have their ballets. There is in the 19th century, Russia goes through a cultural and artistic revolution where it's just a vast output of industry, of artistic domain, of ballet, of dance, of music. You have the greatest classical composers like Mazursky, Borodin, Rimsky-Korsakov, and of course Tchaikovsky, who in my opinion is the goat among all of them. And Tchaikovsky is an expert when it comes to ballets like Swan Lake, and of course his most famous one, The Nutcracker, which is an ancient Russian fable that he takes the nationalism of the era, and this is common for musicians of this time, be it Sibelius in Norway or Beethoven in Germany. You take the nationalist impulses of the time, and although Beethoven was a romantic, it's more Brahms who does that. You take Chopin does this for Poland, even though he's a Frenchman. You take the nationalist themes and the mythology and the ethos and the culture of your country, and you put it into your music, creating a fashionable, beautiful, and eclectic a representation of your culture in that. And Tchaikovsky does that. Prokofiev and Shostakovich will do this in the 20th century during the time of the Soviet Union. Yeah, Tchaikovsky's quite incredible. And I love his tributes to Mozart, his violin concertos. But my favorite work, and I think maybe the most definitive Russian work, because there's something about it that feels extraordinarily Russian, is his first piano concerto, which I think is the greatest piano piece ever made, even above Mozart, and even above Prokofiev's and Rachmaninoff. Rachmaninoff's piano work is amazingly incredible, extremely difficult to play, and considered some of the best ever made. So why am as a history channel ranting on about music? Well, I'm not ranting on about the music. I'm talking about Russia's musical revolution and its artistic creativity, the ballet, the opera, and the music of of legends like Tchaikovsky during the 19th century. Russia went through this incredible golden age of literary, artistic, and cultural and musical creativity. Of course, this is also the time of Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. So, my older brother is currently at the baptism of his goddaughter at Maronite Church. He ate with the bishop. Okay. Release the Mohammed files. Aisha was 9. Oh, for goodness sakes. Um, are there any historical fiction books about Russia history? I don't know about any historical fiction books off of the top of my head, but there's plenty of great Russian history books if you want a recommendation. Franz Liszt is my favorite. I do love Liszt. He's very, very good. Hungarian. Where has your channel been? I mean, it's been right here, Chuck. Anytime you want to come and see it, it's right there waiting for you. Just get notified. Hit the notification bell. Smash a like and subscribe. Hit the like button, smash the subscribe. Which one is it? Smash the like button, subscribe, get notified. Um, so mythology is quickly becoming the real history. I don't know what that means, Roger, but okay. Music influenced history. I always thought that Lenin benefited from the revolution. Yes, it's true. Is that Vesuvius? Yes, that's Vesuvius with Pompeii in the foreground. You know what? If you guys can give me a minute, I will change into my smoking jacket and then we will go from there. So I will be right back. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. If you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so and think about topics you would like me to discuss regarding history and social sciences as we move along. We are almost halfway through our Saturday Q&A. We have two of these a weekend, Fridays and Saturdays, 6 and 3 respectively, Eastern Standard Time. And tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern, an hour later than usual, we'll be lecturing on a particular topic that you get to vote on. And we also will have our an hour Q&A for members only following that. So please join us. So 5 o'clock for the live stream lecture and 6 o'clock for the members only Q&A, but you got to be a member to join us for that. And of course, there's long, short, and live form content available going back years now. So I will be right back. Thank you for joining us. It's great to have you here. Yeah. And when I will be back, I'll be back in my usual outfit. Okay. That's better. Actually, it feels better. It feels so soft on my skin, but it's a little heavy and it's a little warm today. So, Lennon benefited from the revolution. Which revolution would John Lennon benefit from, other than the song Revolution? And yes, history Hefner. So this is a smoking jacket, which is a very historical piece in and of itself. Smoking jackets were made by the British in the 19th century for their officer corps, who, after fighting with the Ottoman Turks in a surprise, the British and the French joined the Ottoman Turks to fight against the Russians on this day, 1854, March 28th. Um, After surprisingly joining them and handing the Russians their rears during the Crimean War. As a reward, the British would bring home their officer corps Turkish tobacco. And smoking became quite common. Smoking pipes became extraordinarily common. It was already common, but it became even more popular as a sign of the elite officers who had fought in the war. In order to um, in order to keep their street clothes and uniforms clean, they would put on jackets and dressing gowns, usually after dinner, in order to smoke the Turkish tobacco, and that's why it's called a smoking jacket. Waiting for the cigar sesh to add class to the Q&A. I could grab a cigar right now or a pipe. I don't like smoking in the studio, although I do sometimes. If you really want to see me smoke, because I do like cigars and I do like pipes, during one of I don't like chewing tobacco. It's disgusting, and I hate the smell of cigarettes. But if you do want to see me, that would be another bonus to the members only Q&A tomorrow at 6 p.m. Immediately following our live stream lecture on a topic of your choice. Again, you get to vote on it here on YouTube. I probably could have a cigar with me, and I've smoked a pipe before during that. I wear my smoking jacket. It's a fun time. It's very, very relaxed. It's chill. There's less people there, usually just members, and they come and they ask all sorts of great questions. Emir, who is a member who's here today, joins us has joined us. Gayahan has too, and it's hopefully very enjoyable. Why does the UK run massive revisionist campaigns instead of actually helping the world? Um, well, the British are extraordinarily charitable and would say that their empire was extraordinarily charitable in what they gave to the other people. Um, I don't have surmisation money. Well, but I appreciate the money that you do have, Doctor Who, What, Where, and is there a topic you would like me to discuss? I really appreciate the super chat and your being a devoted friendly neighborhood historian. They stole from the world instead when they are small and fragile, they steal from their own people. I mean, I don't know if that's fully fair to the British. In many ways, yes, there is confiscation of resources. There's trillions extracted from India and the Indian subcontinent throughout British history. But the exchange, the cultural, like I talked about yesterday, the technological, educational, political, and social opportunities given to these people not only improved a lot of their lives in their native countries, excuse me, but also gave them the mechanisms, especially politically and philosophically, by which they demanded their independence. Gandhi, Mandela, Pol Pot, Ho Chi Minh were all educated in the West and all invoked Western series of thinkings, be it Marx or Jefferson or the French Revolution, in order to a call for the freedom and independence. You believe in liberty, equality, fraternity. You believe in the rule of law. You believe in the in English common law. Well, why don't you give it to us? The only reason you're not giving it to us is because you believe we are racially inferior. And of course, Gandhi got his ideas of nonviolence from Henry David Thoreau and Western thinkers like Augustine, stretching back to the early days of the Christian church. So the truth of the matter is that many of these people, nonviolent protests and things like that, civil disobedience, many of these people were invoking ancient ideas that had predominated and helped shape politics, philosophy, and culture in Western Europe. This is not Jewish history. This is friendly neighborhood history. If you have a question about Jewish history, I'd be happy to answer. If you want to go into conspiracy theories or all sorts of nonsense about Zionism and Israel and that whole geopolitical issue, go back and watch my live stream lecture from a couple weeks ago. I'm not talking about that anymore, Kenny. How was bronze developed? Was it accidentally discovered in multiple civilizations independently? Again, it's one of those things where these technological developments all seem to happen simultaneously. It's like people realize that copper and stone are just not doing it for them. So obviously, it's a tin and copper alloy that's obviously much more durable, and it's much more durable for weaponry. And I think as civilizations grow, they see the need to make better weapons, make better instruments for trade and travel. And that's where you get, and then necessity becomes the mother of invention. You can't have civilizations branching out and developing without having durable tools and weapons. And I think that's where the Bronze Age really comes into play. It's the need of all of these civilizations that are pretty coexistent, coming about at the same time, that would make sense for them to invent these different things that they need. Were Indian jam boys real? I don't know what those are. But now the Indians are extracting a lot of social from the white British working class. Well, again, that's the issue. Is the immigration into the West, the cultural clash that comes from that, is that a result of British imperialism, French imperialism, and even American imperialism? There's some evidence to suggest that it is, but that would be, I think, a more minor reason for that. But again, I don't really want to talk about those issues. I want to talk about history and social studies. So if you have a history about India or Great Britain, I'd be happy to discuss it, but I don't necessarily want to talk about the politics issue. If you want me to talk about politics or religion in a historical context, again, I'm only asking for the sake of keeping this channel about history, which is why it's called the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. Please give a donation. Camino Real. Again, I'm not going to pretend that I know what that is. I don't. Sorry, Ishente. I hate to disappoint anyone, but I'm not an expert on everything. I've heard of Camino Royale history before, but I don't know what you mean. Indian jam boys were Indians that covered themselves in jam to extract incense so they wouldn't bother British golfers during their matches in India. Oh, I've heard of that. Yeah, I've read a little bit about it, but I don't know an awful lot. Have you seen the headline about the UN ruling reparations should be paid for the transatlantic slave trade? Yes, and I think yeah, I will go out on a limb and say that from a historical standpoint, reparations are absolutely ludicrous. And what I mean by that is reparations from the English to the Irish, reparations from the French to the English, reparations from the Italians to everyone because of the Roman Empire, reparations from the Greek to the Persians because of Alexander the Great. Do you really? It's only the only time we ever talk about reparations is in the context of white people repaying Africans for the transatlantic slave trade. There is never a context in which the Moroccans must repay the white people that were enslaved by the Barbary Coast pirates. The Arabs never demand that the Arabs repay the Africans for starting the slave trade to begin with, or that the descendants of African rulers should repay the descendants of African slaves who they had enslaved. The truth of the matter is that this reparations thing is basically an infinite regress of absurdity because everybody has harmed everybody else. That's just how history works. That's how when you have travel, trade, competition, you're going to eventually have warfare, bloodshed, conquest, oppression, and all sorts of horrible abuses of human rights. Reparations makes no sense. It's an infinite regress of suffering and bitterness that ends up with no no um, no one winning and everybody losing. Take for instance the transatlantic slave trade. Spain gives back money to the Africans. The Africans then need to give that to other Africans who they enslaved and tormented and tortured. The northern Africans should repay the Europeans because of the enslavement of many different Europeans, even as far north as Iceland, that were enslaved by the Barbary Coast pirates and other Arab groups and Muslim groups. So It's an absolutely absurd notion that reparations should happen. Japan would owe China reparations for Nanjing. Both China and Japan would owe Korea reparations. However, the Mongolia would owe China reparations. Mongolia would owe most of Asia reparations for the actions of Genghis Khan and his descendants. India would owe reparations to Pakistan and vice versa. Tibet would be owed reparations by China. I mean, this goes on and on and on and on and on. These civilizations have conquered and fought with each other, and when they were not conquering and fighting with each other, the thing that the Europeans did that was unique was the ability to go intercontinentally and continue this competition. This struggle between local peoples eventually became an international struggle because of Europeans, but not because of any sort of genetic disposition towards racism and oppression that was monopolized by white people, but because of their technological ability to go to Africa, go to Asia, and go to Latin America, and go to the North America and colonize these areas, and then have all sorts of horrific and sometimes positive encounters with the natives of these regions. Yes, I think it's an infinite regress of bitterness because you're bitter about what happened to your ancestors, therefore these people owe you reparations. And then you don't think to yourself, wait a second, what did my ancestors do to these other people? It doesn't make any sense. What about the gangs of New York? Was that realistic? Exaggerated in Hollywood, but there were definitely gangs in New York. You have any immigrant group that has come to the United States seeking prosperity has had a seedy underbelly that has tried to gain that prosperity by illicit means. You have the mafia, you have the cartels, you have a Chinese mafia in the western part of the United States, and yes, you do have that with the Irish gangs. So yeah, I'm going to clip that because that is a sick historical take, and I'm sick and tired of hearing about this reparations thing. But thank you for bringing that up. I just think it's an absolutely absurd idea. The Aztecs seem pretty incredible, but they were cut down early. The Aztecs only were in power for about a century or so. They're an extraordinarily overpowered um, society. They're strong, they're militaristic, and they are brutal and they are harsh. Um, and let's go back to the reparations thing. Do the people who are descended from the Aztecs owe reparations to the people descended from the other different Indian groups that the Spanish then unified in order to destroy the Aztecs in 1521 and 1522? Cortez could have never defeated the Aztecs just with his own forces. The idea that the Europeans got to the shores of North America and then immediately, because they had guns and plate armor and large ships, were able to just dominate and oppress the Indians from the beginning is absolutely insanely stupid. It ignores the fact that the natives basically held the power of life and death over Jamestown Colony, over Plymouth Colony, and yes, over Cortez and his conquistadors, over Pizarro. Pizarro could never have defeated the Incas had the Incas not been in the midst of a civil war. Squanto and Massasoit basically controlled the fate um, of the American settlers, the people of Plymouth. So, I think Aztec art was beautiful. Yes, it is very beautiful. Um, there are beautiful things in every form of culture. Reparations, sure. Free one ticket to African country of your choice, even though you probably can't name one. And that's the issue. And this goes into American history. Many people in the United States throughout the 19th century, even Abraham Lincoln, believed that it would be better for blacks to return to Africa because they were dealing with a hostile southern environment and they didn't have the skills necessary to survive in a capitalistic society. They believed it would be better for them to go back to Africa. The problem is these peoples were generations, even centuries removed from their African roots and had no knowledge of what Africa was like at the time. So sending them back to Africa was extraordinarily impractical, but that was a form of reparations that was suggested, as was 40 acres and a mule, which was suggested by General William Tecumseh Sherman at the end of the Civil War. What about my bully from fifth grade, Aaron? Does he owe me reparations for that time? He pulled my pants down in front of my crush, Brittany. No, he just owes you an apology. I mean, the United States did give reparations to the Japanese for the internment camps, but what they did was they gave it to people who had been in the internment camps who were still alive today. None of the people associated with the transatlantic slave trade are alive today, and the UN would be better concerned dealing with human trafficking, which and the 10 million slaves in Africa today, than they would be with reparations from 300 years ago. Yes, I'm sorry, the United Nations serves an important purpose in world affairs, and is an extremely good idea that has actually worked out very well in preventing another world war. But on this issue, it's stupid. And to quote Forrest Gump, that's all I have to say about that. I mean, the population of the Aztecs were massive compared to the colonists arriving, and superior technology allowed for better decentralized warfare on the native population. For almost a century, native bows and arrows, especially from fighters who could fire them rapidly while riding horses were superior to European guns. The arquebus was not the M4 of its day. It was not the AK-47 of its day. It was a pretty sucky gun that would take a long time to reload and could not be used when it was wet because the gunpowder would get wet and it wouldn't fire. If we're going to do reparations, we need to start with all men everywhere making reparations to all women everywhere, which would be bankrupt 50% of the world population. Said so. No on reparations. Um, except that not all women deserve reparations, and not all men, and some men would deserve reparations in that case. I'm sorry, do the sentence I don't think that Madame Countess Bathory, who murdered dozens of hundreds, almost dozens or even hundreds of people, deserves reparations. I don't believe Mary Tudor's family deserves reparations. Um, so, Haywood, I don't even know what you're asking, but don't be racist. Um, What about let me see. What was the purpose of the Revolutionary War? Good question, Judula, and good to see you as always. The American Revolutionary War, which is what you're probably referring to, was the Americans basically deciding that they were sick and tired of being politically bullied by the British. The idea that the Americans revolted over taxes is not true. What is true that the Americans got tired of Britain overlooking them in their political and social negotiations, especially in the affairs that concerned the American colonies themselves. There was no representation in Parliament from the Americans. The Americans were forced to quarter British soldiers, meaning let them live in their house. That's why the Third Amendment, which is almost never brought up, says you cannot quarter soldiers in your home. The government cannot force me to keep soldiers in my home. I can do so willingly, or if I'm a soldier myself, but the government can't force me because most of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and the ideas that the founding fathers articulated in America's founding documents were in direct response to abuses that the British had exposed them to. So the lack of being able to have a say so in your determination of your country is what eventually led the colonials to rebelling and to the Revolutionary War. It's not because the taxes were too much; they were actually much smaller than they were in Canada or India, for that matter. Um, we Spaniards know a sickness of a heart that only gold can cure. That's true. They did want gold. El Dorado was on their agenda for a long time. You have so many of these myths: the Northwest Passage, a quick access to India and Asia, that run through the line for centuries for all different Europeans that occupy and colonize the New World. Um, yeah, reparations are absurd. When the British legalized abolition, they had to provide reparations to previous slave owners, although the British were late to the abolition game. Okay, so let's go down the list. The British were the first to abolish slavery, other than Haiti. They're the first European power to abolish slavery. Then they spent most of the rest of the 19th century trying to stop the slave trade in areas of Africa when the Ottomans were still engaging in it. The British were pretty based when it came to the slavery issue throughout much of the 1800s. I mean, the idea of the abolitionism in America is inherited from the abolitionism in Britain. So give the British some credit there. If a guy from the movie Enigma wasn't gay and could focus on computers instead of other men, how many centuries more advanced might we be, technologically speaking, today? I don't even know what you're talking about with Enigma. Are you referring to the Imitation Game, the guy Benedict Cumberbatch played, who helped the British code crackers during the last World War? Just being gay doesn't mean that you're going to be distracted any more than me being straight doesn't mean that I'm distracted by women. I can do this channel and have plenty of time for the other thing, if you know what I mean. Far cry to call them the first when they nullified colonial attempts at abolition under George III. That's true, and the American colonials were upset about slavery in many ways. But remember, it was Benjamin Franklin who had started an abolitionist society in Pennsylvania, who had barely owned slaves, who struck out Jefferson, a slave owner who impregnated his slaves and refused to free them. His clause in the Declaration of Independence was cut out by Ben Franklin that would have ended slavery because the southern colonies needed to rebel too, not just the northern colonies. The Americans pushed the issue off over and over and over again, and it ended up hurting them quite badly. ChatGPT dude is so annoying. He's also MAGA, FYI. Except that I'm neither of those things. You don't know what I am. I'm not using ChatGPT. Um, I don't read a script. I don't have a script. I'm just looking at the camera. But as they say, better to not type on an internet chat and everyone think you are a fool than to start chatting and to remove all doubt. If the British were late, then who was early? The Persians. Yeah, exactly. The British are the first modernized international civilization to end slavery. Um, uh, Let me see here. You got to give the British credit for what they did in ending slavery. That's absolutely true. Mm. How'd you could how could you think that? We have most of the known world. Well, Britain ended slavery in 1833. They ended the international slave trade in 1807. This is before they really blossomed into the empire they would be. They didn't have control over large sections of Africa. Now, to be fair to those who want to criticize Britain, Britain then went about colonizing Africa in large numbers because they believed the Africans were racially inferior. It wasn't that they believed the Africans were such great people. Mistreatment of the Africans by the British would continue throughout the 19th and into the 20th century. I mean, human zoos, for God's sakes. What they did to the Zulus. I mean, although the Zulus were quite warlike and vengeful themselves. Everything is, if you're getting anything from me and what I'm telling you, it's that everything is complex. Do not try to bake this down into one issue or another. Um, First country to abolish and free slave ships. True. Although the Americans would be the quickest to do it. Although Brazil would actually be the quickest. Brazil ended slavery, I think, 10 years after it was created, after it gained its independence from the Portuguese, and they did it without a civil war, so that's pretty impressive. Emperor Dom Pedro II, one of the most popular rulers in all of history, who was still forced to leave power in Brazil. I argue with the MAGA people all the time because I like to waste my time. This guy is not MAGA. I don't share my political philosophy. I might be. I might not be. What does that have to do with the price of tea in China? My job is to talk about history and social studies. I'll talk about political issues only in a historical context. What was the point of powdered wigs? Um, it was a fashion statement. It was supposed to make you look erudite, sophisticated, and elderly. It's very much a callback to the ancient Greeks and Romans and the toga wearing. There's something about white hair that's supposed to be a symbol of wisdom and virtue. That was very much why powdered wigs were the way they were. I would love to have a powdered wig. I would wear it on the channel. It'd be so much fun, but they were really itchy and really miserable to wear. The British are literally the only civilization which went out of its way to abolish slavery. That I know of. The French did. The Americans obviously did. The Brazilians, I just told you, most of Central and South America ended slavery after they gained their independence from the Spanish and the Portuguese. Social studies is a commie plot to revise history. I'm sorry, having studied social studies all of my life, I wouldn't have known that. History is the specific learning of information of the past. Social studies includes history, but also geography, learning about the areas of the different parts of the world. Social studies can include political sciences, civics, and civilization. Talking about George Washington being the first president is history. Talking about the formation of Washington, D.C. and where it is geography. Talking about what happens there in Washington, D.C., the capital name for George Washington, is civics. Those are all social studies. But why so long and tons of hair? I don't know. It wasn't that long actually. And your neighbor's King Leopold in the conquest. Yeah, what the Leopold and the Dutch and the Belgians did. Never forget. That was absolutely awful and atrocious. Let me see. Muslims were selling slaves for 1,000 years before the Europeans came. Hope you know that. Yes, I did. I already referenced it, Adam 22. It was pretty bad what they did. I mean, people were asking about reparations earlier, and I said the Africans would owe reparations to the Europeans for 1 million slaves that were enslaved over the centuries by the Barbary Coast pirates and others. Um, I literally always wonder what the difference is between history and social studies. You're very welcome. The bikini was invented on July 5th, 1946, the precursor for the 1960 free love movement. Yep, and it was named the Bikini after Bikini Island, where the French tested their first nuclear bomb, and I think it was 1948, not 1945. So why was history class replaced with social studies? Because it's more inclusive, it covers more topics, um, it can be more dynamic. I still just call it history. I think they are all close enough. Social sciences is an even broader group that includes psychology, philosophy, religion, things like that. And social studies, you're learning about the religion and the culture and the philosophy of different people groups and what they taught. You're learning the mythology of the ancient Greeks, for instance, when you teach social studies. Strict history would not require me to really teach Greek mythology. I would like to extend a hand of friendly friendship to your royal friendliness. Well, right back at you, Trollbot. It's great to have you. Welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. This is our live stream Q&A part 2. We do this every Friday and Saturday, and we have our live stream lecture tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern, an hour later than usual. And you can vote here on YouTube for the topic that you would like me to discuss, followed by an hour of Q&A for my members only at 6 p.m. Eastern. So that'll be a lot of fun. You should do a trivia night, get a bunch of questions and do it for 30 minutes. That's a great idea. Yeah, you know what? I should talk to my moderators on Discord about that. We've only got Rodolfo here, and he's great, but we don't have Harry or Harsh. Harsh usually puts the links to my social media, but we do have a TikTok. We do have a Substack where you can read my articles and a Patreon where you can get bonus content. Only things I apologize to the Irish for is taking away their food and forcing them into subject to the crown. Other than that, they sided with the Nazis during World War II. Kind of, until the Americans showed up and were like, no, you don't do that. Um, Canada would go bankrupt without fracking, so fracking is a good thing. I mean, this is the struggle of synthetic materials, versus natural resources, and renewable versus non-renewable. And are you willing to become rich in order to ruin the planet? And in some ways, you need harvesting, you need plastics, you need synthetic materials, you need fossil fuels, or you wouldn't have anything today. It's very, very arrogant to assume we can just get rid of all of these things. But at the same time, of course, the damage they do to the planet itself is actually pretty bad. And Hars is here. Good. I'm glad he got here. Bikini Atoll was it was where the Americans nuke tested, but it was in France, and I believe it's where the French tested their first nuclear bomb too. And yes, those are our social medias that you can follow us on. I'm old and it was called social studies in school for me. There you go. Why was the Soviet Union classified as a superpower despite its various flaws? The United States had many flaws at the time. The Soviet Union had a large army, it had a huge economy, and it was the largest country in the world. And it had a huge hegemonic influence on the area around it with the Warsaw Pact, and the Americans had that with NATO. So that's another reason. And it could influence geopolitical affairs at will. So yeah, that's the Cold War for you. And India only hates us because they think they starved them. Well, no, it was the Japanese army who blockaded the whole country. So Churchill couldn't supply them, and that's what led to the Bengal famine, when 3 million people died. It's one of those difficult decisions made in wartime that I do think haunts Churchill's legacy a bit. But I talk about Churchill all the time. Hars, put my video up on Winston Churchill. You guys can go watch it. He's one of my favorite characters in history. The UK is nothing without their descendant nations changing their diapers. No, the British are still a pretty formidable power. Um, you also have to understand that it's the meme. It's the meme from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles where you have the young turtles being carried by Master Splinter, and then underneath it's the old Master Splinter being pushed along and supported by the turtles. That's Britain. That'd be like the best historical meme. I used to do historical memes on this channel. I probably should do them again. But it'd be Britain, and then you'd have the UK, the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and then underneath it would be those, and they've become the robust powers, and then the British are being pushed along by them. That is, in a way, what has happened. Um, India blames the British for the starvation that happened in World War II that actually that killed millions. It was the Japanese, if you actually looked. Adam, please explain that to me, because I've been told it was Churchill's decision to redirect resources to the army in Myanmar that actually led to that. Um, Abraham Lincoln tolerated slavery. Lincoln wanted to end it. He hated slavery. He believed slavery would die out on its own, which it probably would have. But by the time he became president, the South wasn't willing to talk anymore. And of course, he did redirect the war to ending slavery and would have loved for the war to be about, and basically said, no, the war is about slavery. Abraham Lincoln ended the historical debate that idiots continue to make to this day, that the war was not about slavery. No, the Emancipation Proclamation is Abraham Lincoln making a statement in the time of when it happened, which would echo down throughout history that this war is about slavery. Pay attention. People don't pay attention. America committed genocides against the Native Americans, wiping them nearly off the maps. See, I don't like that terminology. I don't normally think about genocides that are not targeted at an ethnic group in the midst. If you are fighting a war against a particular group of people, again, and by the way, I'm not in the game 393 and Adam of just basically trashing the British and the Americans. There's a lot to love and a lot to lament about both histories of both of these superpowers. They are extremely influential in world history, so you can't understand the world without them. The British have been far more influential for a far longer amount of time, but the Americans have made quick work of catching up and have surpassed the British in almost every metric of success and power. That's a pretty fair statement, and I think it's verifiably true. At the same time, I don't see the Americans as genociding the Native Americans. And I don't see the British as intentionally starving and extracting resources from Africans and the Indians. I think it's far more complex than that. What do you think about the illegal war going on in Iran? Bunny, go. I don't answer political. I'm a history channel. Why do you want to ask me about politics? If you want me to discuss a geopolitical issue with a historical lens, give me a super chat. Or better yet, go read actually do that, and then I will address it. But you can also go and read my Substack. Subscribe to my Substack, and you can read the two articles I wrote, one about Iran and its history of government overthrows and the United States being involved or not being involved in them. And you can also read my newest Substack, in which I challenge the notion not that the war is illegal necessarily, or that the war is justifiable one way or another, but that people have become very, very sensitive to war, which they should. Human beings should be sensitive to warfare and suffering, but that might not actually be as good of a thing as we think it is. We think that it's good to have such a visceral reaction to what we see because the media shows it to us, and that's good. But we don't have proper contextualization, and we don't look at the whole picture or the long story. If people had had this exposure during the Civil War, the slaves never would have been freed. So Bunny, go read that. What do you think about my view when I say that Polk had a history of being a slave owner and his ideology was to defend sovereign influence, so he would do things to support the South? That's fine with me. If you only think that the South is about slavery, then you can make that connection, but it wasn't. America waged war on Mexico to try to take their territory. America invaded Canada, gained land, but failed. Yep. And the British did that in India and Afghanistan. I did a video that got a lot of attention about how many countries Britain has invaded. It's easier to count the number of countries Britain hasn't invaded than that they have. Uh, but I mean, you want to go down the list? Ethiopia, Egypt, India. If you want to separate it, we could add Pakistan and Bangladesh to that. France, Germany. You could argue they fought and invaded against the Native Americans before the United States was ever created. Same thing in Canada. Same thing in Australia. Same thing in New Zealand against the Maori. You don't want to go down this road, Adam, of talking about mistreating and genociding natives. Look at what the British did to the Maori and the Aborigines. But you're going to bring up that most of them died from disease. Well, that's true because that's the case with every European group, even the United States. Yes, defend sovereign pride and influence. I'm not challenging that James Polk wanted to do that. I just don't think that means that sovereign pride and influence isn't just slavery. I have said before that sovereign culture wasn't just slavery. What are they doing with people with Iranian passports? I don't know, Ecouter. Why don't you tell me? Should fat people be forced to buy 2 tickets on a plane? What does that have to do with history? What do you think about Dong the Khan promising no war and then starting a pointless war? What do I think about a politician breaking his promise? Gee, I don't know. Let's see. It's never happened before, so I guess it doesn't matter. The CIA used to permit assassinations. Yeah, the British have never overthrown anyone from power. Never. And never assassinated anyone. No, 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 no. No. Yeah. Mm. America tries to dictate other countries' laws. See, Adam, maybe Harry has become Adam in disguise, but I'm not. This isn't me glazing the US. This is you taking issue with somebody saying something bad about your precious British Empire and you not being able to handle it. The British Empire is impressive, interesting, and a fascinating historical topic, which I've done an entire series on British monarchs. Hars, put in the link on the video to Winston Churchill and the link to the video on my tier ranking of the British monarchs. I have a lot of respect for England and Great Britain, but I'm not going to just pretend that Britain hasn't done bad things. And I'm certainly not going to let you get away with total hypocrisy, historical hypocrisy, when you say, well, look at what America did here, when the British did something almost worse in another context. But NATO's power projection was vastly superior, while the Soviet Union was a threat to its neighbors. They were. They invaded Czechoslovakia. They invaded Hungary. I was talking about this earlier in the live stream, Kyle. A Master Baton Proclamation. Family history. I thought you were family friendly. Um, what did I say? I didn't say anything. Did we really genocide the natives when they were genociding each other? Um, Stop using genocide as a verb. Stop it. It's irresponsible. Stop. Get some help. Not every war or conquest of land or displacement of people is genocide. I'm sorry, but the English do not genocide the French during the 100 Years' War. Just absurd nonsense. The Russians do not genocide the Tatars under Ivan the Terrible. Civil War was about auto-genocide, industrialization. Yes, genocide, 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 genocide. That's our favorite word that nobody knows what it means. And that's why it's our favorite word, because we don't know what it means. And it's a catch-all for bad stuff. There used to be categories. Ethnic cleansing is not genocide. Warfare is not genocide. Displacement is not genocide. Conquest is not genocide. You know what is genocide? Genocide is genocide. Genocide, 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 genocide. What was the justification of the murder and oppression of the Native American people? Conquest and expansionism? The same conquest and expansionism that the natives themselves had used by saying, this land of yours, this is our sacred land, it's ours now.
If you think that the Native Americans were just sitting around waiting to be genocided, you've got another thing coming. And I'm not making any excuses for how horrible the Native Americans were treated. What whites did to the Native Americans is awful and atrocious. But the difference is the Europeans were successful. They had the technological wherewithal, commitment to industrialization, and continuity to create an intercontinental system of oppression and imperialism. Something that the Native Americans, the Chinese, the Africans, the Indians, the Aztecs, the Incas, all of them, and the Middle Easterners, all wanted to do. Some tried and actually got quite far, but never were as successful as the Europeans were with it. This isn't a good thing, it's just a thing. I want a series of Horace, if you could create a bingo card of me and my quotes, that would be awesome. Like, it's not a good thing, it's just or a bad thing, it's just a thing. Or genocide is not war is not genocide. Genocide is genocide. Is it true of that majority of Native American tribes were waging war at each other constantly for horses, land disputes, hunting grounds, and women? Yep. Some of them weren't. There are many peaceful, nomadic, and kind Native Americans who were constantly abused by the others who were not. The idea of the peaceful savage who lived in harmony with nature is absolutely absurd nonsense. The idea of native, it's just as ignorant as the natives were all a bunch of savage cannibals. Equal nonsense. There were Native Americans who were peaceful, and there were Native Americans who were cannibals. Broad brushing the Native Americans is like saying all Europeans are evil, which is the same thing the people who say the Native Americans are peaceful are trying to say about the Europeans. So they're being just as broad brushing in their strokes about Europeans in a negative light as they are being about natives in a positive light. Here's the idea: put down the brush and learn some damn history. Mossadegh. That's how you pronounce his name. Mohammed Mossadegh. He was the prime minister of Iran in the 1950s. At least I'm probably butchering it, but I'm trying to pronounce it. If Faraz was here, he could correct me. At what point did technological superiority surpass industrial surplus? Sorry for the bad articulation. Probably in the mid 20th century when we went from a productive economy to a service economy. Why were the Jews kicked out of 109 countries throughout history? Go watch my live stream lecture from 2 weeks ago, Milan, to learn about why the Jews were kicked out of 109 countries. I address all the different anti-Semitic tropes and questions. The question presupposes is anti-Semitic, and the reason they were kicked out of those countries, most of them, anti-Semitism. Now, I'm not saying the Jews have never done anything bad and that every single one of those is unjustifiable and just because they are Jews. No. But unlike the anti Semites who bring up this 109 countries, I can actually go to individualized countries and say the Inquisition, the Jewish expulsion in 1492 under the Spanish, and the Portuguese did something very similar soon afterwards. The French under Philip VIII. I can talk about the Muslim countries that kicked them out after the 1948 war. Those are rapid examples. Claudius expelled the Jews from Rome. I think that's counted among the 109 countries in about 47 AD because he blamed them for a famine that wasn't their fault. Um, so, yeah, I can go actually through the list and describe some of these events. You can't. Do you think there is a genocide in Gaza? No. Next question. No way affiliated is here. Great to see you. How about a history of protest? Do they make real change? Yes, when they are done without warfare. The Indian National Congress was an aggressive organization that did everything in its power to usurp Britain through terrorist activity in the early 20th century. They got nowhere, their arguments made no sense, and everybody was afraid of them. It was Gandhi who, when he took over, who changed the attitude, along with Muhammad Ali Jinnah in what is now Pakistan, who got them to act on the place where they were basically, the British were like, okay, we can't terrorize you, maybe we should listen to you. And India got free a lot sooner that way. Thank you. I appreciate the smoking jacket compliment and that you know it's a smoking jacket and don't just call it a robe or a dressing gown, although it is both of those as well. Now that I understand your channel and your Substack, I'll be able to ask better questions next time. Well, your questions have been fine, rough to the rescue, and you've been here since the beginning when we had hardly anyone, so I really appreciate welcoming you to the channel and having you here. Please go read the Substack. Warfare is good for forest. For forest? Huh? I guess. The natives version of was a lot different from the European version. Yes, wow, surprise. A version of warfare that is different. I'm not shocked. I'm shocked, absolutely shocked, actually. You can draw a lot of conclusions between Native Americans and Native Middle Easterners. No, most hated were the Comanches. Well, the Apaches were violent. The Hopi were just constantly being abused by these people, by the way. The Comanches, the Sioux, The Iroquois, these were not peaceful people. And you know what? I don't think there's ever really a fully peaceful civilization in history. I can't think of one. No pacifistic civilization can exist completely because you need to have warfare, you need to have borders, you need to have some sort of infrastructure that can defend you. One of the reasons bronze becomes so popular, you have better weapons to defend yourselves, and you better hope to the gods, because you believe in multiple gods back then, because it's a polytheistic period 3,000 years before Christ, that you have the bronze and they don't. Because if they have bronze, then you have to outthink them. The UK owned America. Yes, we know. And Americans are known to be slow. Yeah, I'm an American. I'm not slow. I do talk fast. There's a lot of questions in the chat. I'm trying to answer them. I haven't been able to even drink any of my drink because I've been talking to you guys, but I'm enjoying it. So thank you. Um, Americans are known to be bad at geography, but that's okay. Well, I'm not, hopefully, and people in this channel are not. Hars would take exception to that. He's an American historian. By the way, go check out his channel. He does edits on US presidents that are really cool. Would you want to live in a country that kills each other for religious reasons? No, then America should run the world. Britain, France, Russia, most places in Africa. Well, no, that's not true. Latin America, India, they don't kill people for religious differences, although India gets kind of close with the Pakistan issue. But there's plenty of places in the world that don't kill people for religious reasons. The United States might be one of the better ones, but that's not necessarily the case. Change name to raw history. I have to be raw sometimes because people are just ridiculous. But I try to be nice. If we are comparing about the bad stuff other countries have done, I think America would have more blood on its hands. Maybe in the sense of proportionality, in the sense of how little time it took them to do what they did. And America is the only one that dropped the nuclear weapons, but that was probably better than hundreds of thousands of Japanese corpses littered around their cities with mixed with tens of thousands of American and Soviet soldiers. It's better than the Soviets occupying half of Japan. It's better than Korea being taken over by all of the Soviets, which probably would have happened in that case. I'm glad you love the smoking jacket. Good to see you, John Q. Public. Let's talk on how the Americans waited for 5 years whilst Hitler took the whole of Europe. Let's talk about how the British waited for 6 years, did not enforce the Treaty of Versailles, which they had signed. The Americans had not. Let's talk about that. Hmm? Let's talk about how ineffectual the League of Nations was at stopping Mussolini from committing war crimes in Ethiopia. Hmm. Let's talk about how Neville Chamberlain almost ruined Europe and how Churchill had to save Europe. I love Britain. I love British history. I love European history. I'm a European historian by trade, and I'm an American, and I'm proud of my country just because there's things to be proud of in its history. But I'm not just going to go sit here and pretend that there are things that America hasn't done bad things and that Britain hasn't done bad things. But I'm also not going to pretend that because America has done bad things that they're worse than the British somehow, or the British are worse than them. I have to be consistent. As someone from Britain, I can comfortably say that the British Empire definitely bullied its way around the world, and certainly we're no saints. Heck, we invented concentration camps. It's true. Um, let's talk about how America takes credit for World War I when they only sent volunteers. You mean the Great War? I think you're just mad at the stereotypical Americans who don't know it. Most Americans don't know anything about the Second World War, or what you call the Great War, World War One, the war to end all wars. Um, let's talk about how the Kaiser had gotten Russia knocked out of the war by that point, and what would have happened had the Americans not joined the war, because the overwhelming of the German trenches was Pershing's idea. If the Germans do get back, fulfill the Schlieffen plan in reverse by knocking out Russia and turning their attention to France, I don't know that the British win the war. I don't know. Um, I don't like this version of you. You should sound overly combative. Settle down. I'm answering questions, and I'm answering them quite nicely, I would think. Own millions of slaves for almost a millennia. Guys, we fought to end slavery. Typical British revisionism. That's not fair. And they didn't own slaves for millennia. Ethnic cleansing isn't genocide. Not necessarily. Ethnic cleansing is the removal of an ethnic group of people from a particular area by warfare, conquest, or displacement. That's not necessarily genocide. Native Americans leaving different lands is not genocide. The Irish leaving during the potato famine is not genocide. We could argue about the Irish potato famines being forced famines that actually are genocidal. That I'm okay with, but not the Irish leaving. America nearly played no part in Great War, so stop taking credit for that. Adam, you are arguing with a ghost. I've already answered the Gaza question. Even the Canadians did more. Well, they had to do more, or else the British would have had to be mean to them because the Canadians were a colony of the British at the time. I mean, they kind of had it coming with the lack of technological process. Okay, I'm just going to ignore the British American debate. I've already answered all of this. Um, Let me see. You may have sent some supplies over, but you didn't fight in it. Not only did we fight in it, we reorganized the world system afterwards. And when we didn't join that world system, it failed. When we did join that new world system, it worked. The British didn't do nearly as good of a job at running international affairs with the League of Nations as the Americans did with the United Nations. Sorry. If your people aren't more advanced, I'm sorry, but I just can't continue to allow you to just make nonsensical statements. Can we get back to history? Um, I already answered the genocide in Gaza question. The Spanish, I don't know how far behind I am in the chat. I'm trying to catch up. The Europeans had friendly natives on their side. That's true. They never would have won without natives. You have the Mohawk Indians helping the British during the French Indian War, and you have the Huron fighting with the French. Why did the Native Americans develop a comparable culture to the steppe when they were introduced to the horse riding? They were itinerant, so were the people of the steppe, and they are probably related ancestrally. But you just take the itinerancy of the Native Americans and apply it to the wide open spaces of the United States. It makes sense, actually. You conquered tribes and forced them out of a land which they had inhabited for centuries. You're going to be really sad when you hear about how the British took over Ireland, aren't you? Um, oh, you're an APAC shill. That's why you're saying ethnic cleansing is in genocide. Yes, I'm clearly paid by APAC. That's why I have tons and tons of followers. That's why I have thousands of people asking questions right now. Super Pacemaker, go watch my live stream lecture from a couple of weeks ago, and don't even mention the APAC shills thing, because if I was getting paid by APAC, I wouldn't be here right now. Um, they call Adam. Don't tell friendly history to know his history. I'm the only one to say that, except that neither of you know your history. They colonized America millennia before whites. What? And after we left America, you decided to kill each other. What? I'm an Israeli. I love the way you speak about the matters. You're brilliant. Thank you, Lizard. I appreciate that. Change your ruler. The truth is the British are the devil. No, the British are not the devil, neither the Americans are the devil. The devil resides in each and every single one of us as the purest expression of our greatest evil. Um, any comment on Greater Israel? That's a geopolitical issue. I'll take a super chat on it. I generally don't like the idea. I could give a historical analysis of it, but I would want a super chat. But ceramics, you've already done enough for the channel. Since you have, I will say this. It's obviously acquisitive, it's obviously expansionist, and it's obviously imperialist, and that just doesn't sit right with us in the 21st century because we apparently know better. But I will say this. Throughout all of the history of that region, Israel did not exist as an independent nation. There has not been a Jewish state in that area for 3,000 years. Sorry, for 2,000 years. So them wanting to be acquisitive and expansionist and being condemned by the West for that and by the Muslims for that is really, really hypocritical when you consider the West got to be the West through acquisitiveness. No society, no civilization, especially one that is cornered and surrounded by enemies constantly, ever survived without expanding. I'm not saying that they should do it. I'm saying I understand some of the reasoning for it. That doesn't mean I agree with it. I'm obviously a 21st century person that sees the downsides of colonization and conquest. I'm saying that Israel itself, there would be no Dome of the Rock without imperialism and conquest. There would be no United States without imperialism and conquest of Westerners. So for the United States, for people in America to stand on a platform and to condemn it is kind of shaky ground to stand on. So that's what I will say about the Greater Israel Project. I think it's madness. I don't think it's going anywhere. Um, and I understand some of the reasoning, and I think that it's just nature of humans to want to expand or die. That's what the Romans used to say. But I don't think that that necessarily makes it a good idea. I think the suffering caused by that would be untold. So yeah, um, the British are terrible at making country borders. Look at what happened in Africa. The French are bad too. You're Jewish. No, I'm not Jewish. But thank you for the compliment. Um, let me see. Need warfare. Need warfare? No, I never said anyone needed warfare. I'm saying that human beings, it's part of what we do. Washington fought with the natives. He watched them bite the scalps off of fallen French. I don't know if that part is true. War is evil. Yes, war is crazy and ridiculous and evil, and I'm sorry, but war is going to happen. I'm really, really sorry that war is evil and awful. I'm glad that you understand what Tucker Carlson says when killing innocent people is bad. Yes, Tucker. We all know that. Now take this coloring book and go stand in the corner. Everybody should know that war is bad. Plato knew war was bad, and Plato didn't see war broadcast on televisions or on TikTok. We should all know war is bad without having to see grisly images of Matthew Brady's painting pictures in the Civil War. In war, fathers bury in peace, fathers bury their sons. In wars, in peace, sons bury their fathers. In war, fathers bury their sons. That was either Sophocles or Plato who said that. The ancient Greeks knew it. Everybody knew it. Sun Tzu knew it. But they all knew that you had to be prepared for it because it was going to happen. That was the wisdom of the ancients. We don't have that wisdom today. We live in this idealized world where we can just stop fighting people, right? Yeah. You don't want to know. Well, we should just be nonviolent. We should just be against war in any form. I'm sorry, but how's that going to stop the Nazis, the Soviets, any other group of people? Those who are in peace prepare for war. That's another ancient Greek quote. I'm sorry, but it's just true. War is terrible, Bunny. I absolutely agree with you. In fact, nobody knows about the numbers of war in history, in at least maybe here, like I do. You're not going to find me praising war, glorifying war. I'm just saying it's a necessary evil, and I would rather fight in it and have the better, not good, the better side win than have the other side win, to leave the other side to just do whatever it wants. Did you say America should run the world? No, I did not say that. I will go so far morally to say, and this goes to the greater Israel thing, would the world be a better place if the United States called all of the shots? I don't know. If the United States instituted compulsory religious toleration in the Middle East, that would solve a lot of problems. Of course, it theoretically if you could get the people to actually be religiously tolerant. Um, when the Roman Empire fell, there was a power vacuum of original claims to God. That's partially true, but the barbarians filled up those power vacuums very quickly and settled the territories around them. Yep, you have to start geography. You have to learn geography. Harris is absolutely 100% correct. Bob Dylan getting a Nobel Prize and then not attending the ceremony is funny. Bob Dylan's just weird. Timothy Chalamet played him amazingly. Chalamet, not Chalamet. All right, I'm out of here. You are Chill, who doesn't think genocide and ethnic cleansing are the same thing. Why? Because you know Israel guilty of genocide. Or maybe I just know history. You can commit genocide and ethnic cleansing, and they often go hand in hand, but they're not the same thing. Sounds like you are a warmonger who supports violence. Sounds like you're a troll who doesn't listen to people. You're Jewish. Oh, wow. No, I'm not. Let me see. Mods are all American. One of my mods is British. It's going good, Benny. How are you? Rich, well, yeah, and 393, people ignore Lend-Lease. They ignore the fact that the Soviet Union wouldn't have lasted in the war without the British and the Americans, and the British wouldn't have lasted without the Americans. They ignore the Atlantic Charter. There's a lot to ignore. You can ignore all sorts of things in history if you want to, but you can't. But I have to, as a historian, I would be morally culpable if I ignored certain things. Um, Rich loves war to clean for new seedlings. Things are changing. Yeah, but war's going to happen. Do you appreciate Noam Chomsky and Howard Zinn's takes and criticisms? They're extremely intelligent individuals. They're also wrong. They live in an idealized world that doesn't exist. I don't know any civilization in its history that would survive Zinn critiquing it like he did the United States. I'm sorry, you're just not going to get it. Um, Internment of a Japanese during World War II. Why is that? Well, at first, I think it's World War III. Harsh, if you could put the video to the 7 Years' War about why I think that's the first World War, I would really appreciate that. But basically, during the Third or Second World War, whatever you want to call it, 120,000 Japanese were forced by Executive Order 9066 to basically go into what were into internment camps. They're not concentration camps. The people were not tortured, abused, or oppressed. But of course, they had their civil liberties taken, their businesses were destroyed, and they were forced to live in these areas for years. Most of them were American citizens. It's one of the saddest chapters in American history. Later on, these people received reparations, although that's no repayment for the losses of income and social standing that they had, only because they were Japanese. The Germans and Italian Americans did not suffer the same fate. They suffered discrimination, but not systemic prejudice because they were different. One out of every three Romans was a slave. That is true. Dude, you're so lame. No one's debated you. It's like you mad at no. Read the chat series. American Lend-Lease and the Marshall Plan gave Europe nearly $1 trillion to rebuild. It wasn't just out of the goodness of Americans' heart. They wanted to stop the Nazis. They wanted Britain to remain an ally, and they also wanted to stop the spread of communism. America had its own geopolitical interest. It's not all humanitarian from the Americans, but there is a rebuilding aspect. Um, So, by the way, I am sorry if I'm not answering the questions. I'm trying to get through everything. So, if you haven't had your question answered, please be patient. I will get to them when I can. The United States had more control in a short period of time over the globe than the United Kingdom ever did on the United States. True. Your hair looks great, bro. Let me fix your eyebrows. We can talk. Then we can talk about genocide. My eyebrows are fine, and my hair is great. Thank you, Brian. Did you mourn Russell Crowd's passing? I don't know who that is. So the answer would be no. We need to stop allowing Europe to pretend they are relevant still. Europe is still extremely relevant. We can't just ignore it. And you can't ignore it as an American because you have to understand the cultural, ethnic, and religious ancestry and influence of Europe on America. UK is in Islamic control. Shut up, Limey Grossman. Oh, come on. Don't be so rude to him. And why are you only deleting Adam's comments? I don't even know what Adam's saying. It's not just you're just deleting Adam just because he's, you know, going off on the British. Don't You're not deleting everyone else, Harsh. So leave Adam alone. Did the natives I'm just gonna ignore what they're saying. Did the Native Americans enslave each other? How did they do that if they lived in mud huts? Some of them lived in mud huts. You can have slaves that sleep outside the mud huts. What is the history of Croatia? Don't know a huge amount about it. Obviously, it's part of the Yugoslavian area after the last World War. That's Tito's dictatorship, and eventually that falls apart. He was arguing in support of genocide. There's a difference between saying something is a genocide and something isn't a genocide, and arguing that something isn't a genocide just because you think it is, and supporting genocide. I never said that I liked what was happening. I only said that it's not a genocide. There's a difference. Um, the Welsh assimilated and the Scots fought and eventually lost. Today, the Scots have more recognition than the Welsh, so it pays to fight. Fair point. Yeah, that is. Well, although the Welsh did fight in many ways, but it was the same man, Edward Longshanks, who was the hammer of both the Scots and the Welsh, the first Prince of Wales. Do you appreciate? I already answered this. He is kind of correct about the Marshall Plan in World War One. Adam, Britain was in debt, and America provided 13 billion. Not for just being. It's World War Three. It's not even World War One. Not just out of the goodness of their hearts, though. There were political motivations and all sorts of other things going on with that. Stalin personally thanked America Lend-Lease for the war effort. Yeah, Stalin was a hypocrite, to say the least. Beef stroganoff is Hungarian, Russian. It's quite an amazing dish. The Americans were shipping in weapons to Britain on the RMS Lusitania in violation of the neutrality treaty, which provoked the Germans to sink it. Opinion. That's true. Absolutely true. I ate pre-made beef stroganoff in package. You added milk, water, and stuff. It was bad. Yeah, use sour cream and make it from scratch. Shred the beef. Good stuff. Uh, have any of you talked to Jesus today? You should. We haven't talked to Jesus, but we've talked about Jesus because people ask questions about religion all the time here. This is a history channel, not a religious channel. This is a Wendy's, sir. Um, let me see. What man can do, man will do. Yep, absolutely. Friendly History has the best Tucker Carlson accent. I don't know about that. I wouldn't say that. I mean, if anyone tells you I have the best Tucker Carlson accent, then they're clearly lying to you. I mean, it's obvious. Everybody knows it. Even the people who don't know it are just lying to you. Um, I'm so sorry. I had to talk with a family member for a moment. Did anyone see if he answered my question? I'll repost it. Do you appreciate Noam Chomsky, and Howard Zinn's views? I appreciate them. I don't agree with them. I don't think any country could stand up to the Zinn critique that he gives for America. But Zinn doesn't critique other countries because he hates America. He hated. He's dead now. So when the Communist Party kicks you out for being too extreme, you might want to rethink your life. Europe would have fallen to direct communism in 1,000 years of godless darkness without the American saviors. That's what Stalin wanted. Stalin wanted the Nazis to provoke political chaos so that he could take over and foment a revolution. That's why he allied. That's why Molotov-Ribbentrop. That's why he basically agreed to split Poland. He didn't ally, but the Nazis distracted the world while he invaded Finland. This kid is the devil. Yeah. Well, the devil is handsome and clever, so thank you. Um, Let me see. Uh, Typical Adam European running away. Lots of comments though. Yep, I'm sorry, M1000. Hopefully you saw the answer now. I think Iran will ultimately defeat America in 5 days. I think you're from Iran, but I appreciate your gift, but the Iranians cannot defeat the Americans. They can only hope the Americans will stop. That been described to you since you had somewhat less than 1,000. Well, set trending. I'm so glad to see you. Thank you for being a loyal, friendly neighborhood historian. If you want to become a member, you get members only now that we're monetized. Now that since we weren't monetized back then, you can get members only lives. You can get bonus content, including our members only Q&A tomorrow at 6 p.m. Directly after our live stream lecture on a topic you can vote on. I live in the Netherlands. We don't have anti-aircraft defense. One rocket on our dikes and we'll be underwater. Like it's the opposite of Israel. Did you know the US invented the airplane? Kind of. America was this not really, because that was the moral thing to do. What was the moral thing to do? Let me see here. The 7 Years' War. Please go take that out. Take our coloring back and go back to the corner. I'm s- I'm sorry. I hate to be me. I mean, Tucker Carlson. I saw him talking about. It's not even the politics. I don't care about his politics. When he talks about history, the man and civilization, the man shows either willful ignorance or he's just an absolute moron. Yeah. Oh my gosh, innocents have died in warfare? Wow. That is mind-blowing, and they shouldn't? Yeah, of course they shouldn't. No one should have to die, but they're going to. I'm sorry. People are going to die in warfare, and if your hope is that you minimize civilian casualties, but minimize, not eliminate. Yeah, I'm gonna start using that coloring book quote. I hate to be, stodgy and, chip and chintzy and be in people's faces, but when people start bringing up nonsense narratives to me, I have to debunk them. I'm gonna try to catch up to the chat. Um, have you ever eaten beef stroganoff? Yes, many times. Putting the Japanese in internment camps was strategic blunder. I don't understand. It was a terrible, terrible mistake, and it's by an overrated president. If you understood that FDR was a racist, then you would understand that. Nobody cares about this because they're lying to you. It's obvious. Everybody knows it. The evidence is everywhere. Um, you got to eat it the correct way series. Black Americans are entitled to reparations. America, Argentina, and Israel said no. Don't surprise me. Uh, oh yes, yes, yes. Baby Bubba, you didn't listen to the earlier part of the chat. When the Africans get reparations, will the North Africans give back to the Europeans who they enslaved? Will the Arabs pay reparations? Did the UN say that the Arabs owe reparations? Because I think there'd be an issue with oil prices, a much worse issue than it is now with the Iranian war, if the UN told the Arabs to pay back for creating the African slave trade. Why won't the British give Northern Ireland back to the Irish? Because the Northern Irish are mainly Protestant, and the people of Ulster have generally wanted to stay in the UK. Was Nixon's decision to ally with Pakistan during the 70s war a strategic blunder, or was butting up to the Chinese? It was basically a wink and a nod to the Chinese, basically giving tacit approval over China's illegal takeover of Tibet. Will the Turks apologize for the Armenian genocide? Who knows? We want to call everything a genocide. So when we do that, the whole term, I'm the one, people think, oh, you're pro genocide, you're pro this. I'm the one who thinks that genocide is so horrible, you should only use it in certain circumstances. Y'all are the ones who basically have stripped it of any meaning, where any sort of warfare, any sort of destruction of personal property or displacement of individuals is genocide, which means almost every single war in human history is genocide, and the thing loses all of its meaning, and then it's as neutral as a term as war is. The Turks are not going to have kind of apologized, but they don't really want to. Yeah, the sign of the Soviets, but it was capitalizing on that to bring the Soviets to the table, and he did with détente. The Soviets just never followed along with what détente demanded from them. So 393, Nixon was trying to get the Chinese away from the Soviets. So you do think that the recent conflicts around the earth will be looked at in the future as World War III? No. I have said that the 7 Years' War is World War One, the Great War is World War II, and the war with the Nazis is World War III. The next World War will be World War IV. When it comes to Stalin, every second of that man's life is probably a separate occasion of him pissing me off. You should learn about his entire life, like I have. Um, let me see. People dying more. Yes, people. Hey, I've got caught up to the chat. That's incredible. I never thought I would. Why did you think of Putin's? What did you think of Putin's history lesson with Tucker Carlson? Uh, I think that Tucker Carlson discredited himself when he interviewed Vladimir Putin because he didn't push back on him hard enough. He didn't do this to the president of Iran. He'll do it to Ted Cruz about Israel because he hates Israel, but he won't do it to the president of Iran. If anyone like Tucker Carlson, a white Christian male, were really forced to pick between Iran and Israel, if they were in their right mind, they would pick to live in Israel. Um, so, yeah, people dying more. What a surprise. The British are not the devil incarnate. I think everyone's just trolling each other. The hatred for the black slave descendants is obvious. You have dishonored my ancestors again. I don't care about your ancestors, and you shouldn't care about mine. I care about history. I care about your ancestors as much as they were history. I don't hate anyone's ancestors. I'm ambivalent towards people's ancestors. I'm ambivalent towards what people's ancestors did because that's the only way we survive. We're not going to bring back ominism, where everything my ancestors did must be worshiped, revered, or hated. No. Ancestors do terrible things. People have bad ancestors. I'm not going to have Henry Louis Gates interview me and have me crying about my ancestors. I'm sorry. Henry Louis Gates is an excellent historian, but that is just a bunch of nonsense and stupidity, in my opinion. I'm not going to start breaking down and crying because some of my ancestors were bad. How many of us come from abusive families where our own parents were bad to us? And we're taught by our society to overcome that, but we're taught if our ancestor from 300 years ago did something bad, we can't overcome that until we fork over money to the descendants of other people. It's lunacy. It's stupid and it's destructive. I'm sorry, but you've triggered dark history. There's friendly history, which is just me in my normal spot. Friendly history Hefner with me in my smoking jacket. Then there's dark history, where if people really start to tick me off about this, I go after it. Say that your mod is black and he agrees with you. I don't care about anything pertaining to who is black or who is not black. I have nothing but love for all people. Your ancestors don't define you. You define you. Hey, Mr. Bill, if you condemn violence, then you condemn some ancestors. Yeah, I condemn some ancestors. Yeah, I condemn Genghis Khan. I condemn the things that the Spanish did to the Aztecs. I condemn the things the Aztecs did to each other. Yeah, I condemn uh, King Leopold II. I condemn some ancestors. Yeah, I condemn people. Yeah. Oh, I condemn Stalin. I condemn Hitler. Yes, I condemn some ancestors. When I say I don't care about ancestors, there is no weight or stock that should be put into what your ancestor did to opposed to what you did. If Stalin's daughter can own a clothing store in Seattle and live a normal life, then so can you, even if your great 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 grandfather owned a slave or two. I just got to my point. My point is live free and ignore and do not let what your ancestors did. Don't ignore it. Learn from it. Don't let what your ancestors did turn you into a sad, weak person. So, how come the Turks won't give back Cyprus to the Greeks? Well, they gave back part of Cyprus, just not all of it, because they have to control part of it because they're the Turks and they don't want the Greeks getting ahead of them. Do you care about history to the point where if you got certain things wrong, you would change your thoughts? Sure. I just need to be shown that I was wrong. I've changed plenty of things. I've been fact checked a lot. Um, there's a reason why people are disliking Israel these days, and they have because they are the thorn in the side of the Middle East, and since their conception, they have been a rogue terrorist state. What? Go back and watch the live stream lecture. I'm not talking about this with you. Um, so, um, 2026. No one cares what color your skin is. We leave that to the race and oppression peddler. I genuinely hate Hitler less than Stalin. I hate both of them. Stalin is worse than Hitler. Love you too, Bill. If you go all over the world in history, you could see that many cultures have been doing rotten stuff to each other and others. Yes, but this is the problem, Bill. You say that, then you go on about Israel being a rogue terrorist state without realizing what radical Islam is. I'm sorry, it's not you and your side being the victims because people will never talk about what Israel does wrong. It's you who ignores what other people do wrong because you only want to focus on what Israel does wrong. Gmail what somewhere? Yeah. Harsonet doesn't deserve reparations. You know how you give reparations to Harsonet? Like and subscribe to his channel, and if he gets monetized, give him a super chat. Harsonet doesn't need reparations. He's above reparations. I don't need reparations. Okay? I don't share my ethnic background, but I'm white, and white people have been oppressed over and over and over again, including my own ancestors on both sides of my family. Does that mean I deserve something? Who gets to define what oppression is? The more you think about it, the stupider this should become. Yeah, you don't need reparations, Hars. You need subscribers. So people go subscribe to him. Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought you would like that, Hars. I'm being based. Unbelievable. Where's the justice? Karma will get those who enslave my people. Karma already got them because they're dead. If you have an issue because someone in your life now has been enslaved, you go and figure that out. There are 10 million slaves in Africa. The UN should be focused on freeing them, not on what happened 200 years ago. And I know the irony of a History Channel saying that. Let me focus on it. The UN doesn't get to make moral value judgments. Well, they do, but they're wrong. History is history. Let that go. I think that the United Nations should be focused on more of the domestic current issues that are affecting that rather than, ooh, bad things happened a while ago. So therefore, because of that, only white people owe reparations to Africans. Doesn't go both ways. Ridiculous. Will you be making homosexual ham party again this evening? Sure. That reflects the rogue terrorist state of Israel. It is what it is. There's no way to sugarcoat it. There are, and they have been since 1948. That's just history. Islam is not, I'm sorry, but Israel did not create radical Islam. If that, okay, look at India, look at Pakistan. They're not anywhere near Israel. Look at Nigeria and Boko Haram. That's not Israel. Radical Islam is a severe problem everywhere it goes. Yemen has loved slave auctions to this day. Clueless race peddlers can only look back in time. They they are stuck in the past. And I love history and I learned so much about the past, but I'm not stuck in the past. I am not Jewish. Um, the Quran creates radical Islam. Not necessarily. Was it true that Yaqub created the evil white race 5,000 years ago? Yeah, sure. White people are evil. Yeah. I can say that, and everyone's like, okay, that he's just being stupid. But if I were ever to all white people are evil, I could say that. But if I were to say all black people are evil, there's a double standard. I'm sorry, but there really is. And just for the record, neither group is all evil. Do you believe in God? So that's the question I get asked a lot. I don't share my religious background. I've said before that I do believe in a God, but how active I think he or she or it is in the universe is totally up to your imagination. Do you know about the Kernier Commission? I recently read about it. No, I do not know about it. I am a white Afrikaner living in South Africa, and I honestly understand the people that want their land back. British 1910 Land Act literally abolished black communities from the land. I can understand that, but is that land even available? Hasn't that land already been taken back? Is stealing it and kicking off people who have nothing to do with that, who live there, is that justifiable? I don't know. That's why I'm a historian and not a social scientist. There are tricky patterns to this. But the demand for reparations is an endless regress of infinite suffering. Why won't Great Britain give back Northern Ireland to the Irish? Because I already answered this. They don't want it. But you won't say the British are the devil incarnate. The British have plenty of evil things that they have done. I'm an apologist for history. So, how shall we calculate how much reparations that I get? I don't know. I don't really care. More like unfriendly white nationalists of the future support group. Yeah. Yeah, totally. A right nationalist. Um, how do I hide the chat? I don't know. And now you will be defeated by Iran Yaqub the devil. I'm not being defeated by anyone. And if the US loses this war, I don't care. No one said Israel created radical Islam, but they created situations in the last 80 years of doing rotten things which causes them to be hated. No, radical Islam is hateful. Whether Israel does that is their own worst enemy or not is not the issue. Radical Islam is hateful in and of itself. Tell us something new. Boring. I don't know. What do you want to, if you have a question about history, ask it and I'll answer. Whoever left a comment that the Quran causes radical Islam, you have never read the Quran, you're an idiot. Uh, the rocks will say the Jew is hiding behind me, come kill it, and the mountains will cry out, and the hills and the trees. There's plenty of violence in the Quran. There's plenty of violence in the Old Testament, but nobody is saying that the Old Testament is peaceful. Let me see here. Free South Africa. From who? Free South Africa from who? The corrupt government of Cyril Ramaphosa? Okay, I'm fine with that. The British are gone. The Dutch are gone. There's some white people who still live there. What does that mean? What does that look like to free Africa? Poor things. What's up with the low IQ chat today? People are ignorant. Call out everybody. Nobody's exempt. If you want to look at history from the radical Islamists to radical Jews to radical Christians, that's fine, but don't deny that radical what Israel has been doing. I'm not denying anything. I am saying that you are the one denying it. Yeah, the story about Nat Turner is real. I remember that question. It was a great question. You should start selling your robes with your initials on it. Oh, that'd be fun. Getting these anagrammed, uh, FH or FNH. The Northern Irish want to reestablish the British Empire. Do they? Did we build the wall on the wrong side of the border? I don't know what you're talking about. There's violence in all of those biblical writings. Yes, there's definitely is. Yes, all religions have violence in them, and all non-religions have violence in them. Violence is part of the human condition. Don't talk about dignity until you acknowledge history as it actually happened, not lies. What lies have I made? Why are you yelling? The Canadians are British apologists, and we should focus on building our side. I don't even know what you're saying. Radical Islam celebrating their mosquito bites like massive victories. There has been an attitude in Islam ever since the Hijra that Islam, no matter how violent or oppressive it becomes, is always the one being oppressed. Ever since Muhammad was forced to flee from Mecca, which didn't exist in the 7th century, and Muhammad didn't write the Quran, but we'll ignore that. Ever since Muhammad was forced to flee from Mecca, which didn't happen, and go to Medina or Yathrib, he was believed himself to be a victim of, and whatever he did was setting things right. No matter how brutal he got, he was setting things right. Britain invaded broader South Africa to get their grubby hands on the golden diamonds. They put my people in concentration camps. Now they sooner buy blood diamonds with their queen. Their queen is dead. Let's talk about the conspiracy theories about ancient cities in America. Supposedly, American cities are all built on top of old civilizations. No. Thank you. The LDS Church has entered the chat, and they are wrong. Give back the diamond. Sure. Okay. Ask for them nicely. Um, How about you? How can you be a historian and not know the word or what the word swarthy means? Swarthy means. Swarthy means dark and kind of. It's a reference to being dark, strong, big. Usually, it is pronounced Ramposa. Thank you for that, by the way. Historically, the Afrikaner was in large parts of South Africa before the Bantu. So why are the Afrikaners being forced off of their land? Let's not go down that route. Let me see here. My whole point, human beings are violent. Yes, thank you for acknowledging simple basic facts. Let me just say one more thing, because I need to catch up and wrap up the chat, because we went way over to answer all of your good questions and some of your less good ones. I am not saying that we need to ignore history. I am not saying that we need to ignore the ills of the past. I am saying that the ills of the past do not impact who you are as a person today. Well, they can in some ways indirectly. They do not make you who you are. You are not a bad person because your ancestors did bad things. You should not feel guilty because your ancestors did good or bad things. Nor should you feel better than everyone else because your ancestors did bad things or good things. Learn from your ancestors from their mistakes, just like you should learn from all history. Whether your ancestor was Abraham Lincoln or your ancestor was just a common person. Learn from them what they did right and what they did wrong and go forward because you are going to be judged the same way. I would rather people think that I am a good, honest person who wanted to do right by my fellow humankind than to think that I am an evil retrograde racist because I lived in a couple of centuries before their understanding was so enlightened. And who's to say your understanding is better than someone else's understanding? The past is a foreign country that we visit all the time with its own language and customs. Therefore, get used to the language and the customs that you visit, whether you are visiting the Bantu people, the Native Americans, or white Europeans. As a white Afrikaner, we settled by making agreements with people already living here. There is a false narrative that the land was unoccupied, but our own records show otherwise. I never said that the land was unoccupied. I never said that the Afrikaners never took land from the South Africans. We know that they did. Why is Islam so called more violent when murder rates are higher in American cities than in major cities in the Middle East? Uh, I don't know. ISIS, Al Qaeda, Taliban, Boko Haram. The vast majority of terrorism by Muslims is done against other Muslims. If you're a Muslim, you should care about radical Islam and what it is doing to your people. Murder rates are high, and yes, but you are assuming that the numbers coming out of the Middle East are reliable, which that's not necessarily the case. The violence done in the name of a religious belief and not done for greed or gold or gain or whatever is different. There's a difference between looking at homicide rates and looking at religious persecution. Um, uh, Let me see here. Where does the word soiree come from? It's a French word, "soi," "wa," the "oi" being "wa" is French. If there were another country you wouldn't mind living in other than America, what would it be? Great Britain. I'd love to live in Great Britain. It's beautiful. How much do you know about Hannibal and how he conquered? Elephants, basically guerrilla warfare on his enemy's turf, which is what made him so exceptionally good. What forced him out of it was Scipio Africanus and the Romans doing to him what he had done to them. Um, um, in a way, they are more violent. The America is more violent, but I'm talking about religious views and religious extremism, which leads to violence and oppression. If there were large numbers of Christians living in Middle Eastern areas, or Jews for that matter, there probably would be. Their murder rates would probably be much higher. Stamping out your opposition and kicking them out of your country is one way to ensure that you do not have the murder rates. You don't have as high a crime rate because you've gotten rid of those people. So maybe one of the reasons is they've created a homogeneous society where they do not tolerate dissent, and therefore they don't invoke those rules because they can and will invoke those rules, and they've gotten rid of people who will oppose them. Let me see here. There's a good song from back in the days called "Everybody Wants to Rule the World." Yeah, I know it. Tears for Fears, great song. I was just listening to it today. Um, you're honest to everything but American history. I'm honest to all history. The British had their way, we would be living in 1984. That's just nonsense. We should learn not to almost all of America's freedom, rights of the people ideas come from the British Bill of Rights. We should learn not to use political parties dividing us into factions. That's what Washington suggested. I think he was being a tad idealistic. So we Africans should go and take over Europe. See, ain't no fun when the rabbit got the weapon. Uh, go ahead. Let me see. Um, all the Abrahamic religions are inherently authoritarian by their very nature. Not necessarily. They don't have to be. More money in the Middle East. Also, everybody dies everywhere, but the focus only mainstream is one spot and lives more. Yep. Disproportionate mistreatment. I'm about forgiving to a point, but I'm also about revenge. Okay, go ahead. Go and invade Europe. See how that goes. Some people would say it's already happened. Um, I love how people are just repeating themselves when they're just saying the same nonsense they've been saying over and over again. I was replying to another comment that claimed Afrikaans claimed unoccupied land. It's a common false narrative. That's absolutely nonsensical that they claimed the Transversal, the Orange Free State, these lands were occupied by Africans for thousands of years before then. Political parties no longer have a monopoly on power. That's kind of true. Let me see here. I did not see that coming. Would you love Rat? Israel dragged America into war with Iran. And blurred lines, are you just high and drunk and stupid at the same time? Compare different armored column philosophy of the 20th and 21st century. I don't know what that is. The Constitution came from the native Iroquois. No, it did not. The Iroquois did not have a constitution. They did not have a written document. The Constitution is inspired mainly by the British Constitution and Bill of Rights. A couple admiring the Iroquois Confederacy and how they work together does not mean they created your entire political system. Talking about guns per capita? That's no, I did not. What legitimate grievances? I am not a British shill. I love a lot about Britain and I love a lot about the United States. I'm going to talk about them in proportionality and not with bias and not by using all caps because you just lie. I don't get to skate over certain points. No, and I haven't skated over anything. Do you know who owns CNN, Fox News, and all the rest, and who controls the media, controls the narrative because it pushes out to the masses? Rupert Murdoch family. Murdoch does not own CNN. What have I skated over? I don't know what I've skated over. You guys have not been able to articulate any of that. I've been going for almost 2 hours answering everybody. So I don't know what I'm skating over. I've tried to answer every single quote, every single chat. I don't know about guns per capita. I just don't know enough about that to comment on it. And this is a history channel. We should be talking about history. Um, no, I don't like to do either. So I don't like to do either. I'm gonna wrap it up. Everything was going great until everybody just decided to, start being willfully ignorant. Um, I appreciate the dialogues. I appreciate people asking good questions, but there's a lot of bad faith actors, unfortunately. Um, History doesn't care about your feelings. That's absolutely true. Now take this coloring book and go sit in the corner. The Soviet armed column philosophy was a quantity over quality approach. Armed columns refer to tanks and formation. Oh, yeah. You can intimidate your enemy, or at the very least, you can throw enough numbers at them to destroy them. The Americans kind of did this by having the highest productivity numbers, and that's how they actually were able to defeat the Nazis, not by having the better technology. Thank you, BPD. I'm glad that you were here. Hypocrisy. That's what America is. Are the Barbary Coast pirates and Northern Africans who complain about colonization and slavery, are they hypocrites? Because they enslaved millions of people. Are the Arabs, when are the Arabs going to be called into account for any of the nonsense they've done? I hear all about the Americans in the West and the Europeans, and sure, fine, yes, what they did was awful. But I never hear anyone from Africa talking about the Muslims and what they did, or about what the Africans did themselves to each other or to the Europeans. You don't care about this because you have an agenda, because your mind is poisoned. That's what I hear. People poison their minds with all sorts of narratives, and they don't answer or deal with historical knowledge or information consistently. Um, Lions, you are not in good faith. You yell every single one of your statements. Then you say something ridiculously absurd that can't be backed up historically and believe that it's actually true. There were certainly no Bantu in Cape Colony when the Dutch arrived in 1653. Yes, but there were other Africans living there. The Bantu are not the only group of people that live in South Africa. Yo, Hodges, good to see you. Bantu are a group that is named after their language that have been migrating all over Africa for thousands of years. What happened to cause those actions? I don't know. Muslims love to enslave non-Muslims. That's so by that logic, when you say, then this is the argument I heard, which is a nonsense, stupid argument that the Europeans only enslaved the Africans because the Africans were doing it to them first. That's not true. But it is true that the Africans were enslaving white people before the Europeans started enslaving Africans. At least Northern Africans and the Ottomans and the Arabs were enslaving Africans long before, and other Africans were enslaving Africans and white people even long before the Europeans started enslaving other Africans. And again, we're using too broad a brushstroke. It's various different European countries that start enslaving at certain particular time periods, like the Portuguese, for instance. Guns have been around for over 20 years. Thank you, Steve. Didn't know that. The Americans in the West and Europeans and what they did was awful, and what they currently doing is awful. Add yes, call out everyone else. That's fine. I'm calling out everybody. It's just one group of people who doesn't call other people. Mala is asking if I'm gay. Who says I'm gay? The Arab colonization isn't discussed as much in the English world for obvious reasons. It's discussed right here. I'm in the Angloid world. The United States is part of the Angloid world. I am being completely unbiased and faithful with my accusations. Then why are you yelling most of your comments with a caps rage? I'm not highlighting anything you say, Lions, because you're not acting in good faith. My point about American culture being more or less violent than Islamic cultures when considering guns, death rates, and crime. I already answered that. I am referring to religious violence and persecution. I'm also talking about a homogeneous culture that has already removed most of the potential dissent that would be the basis for that violence. That's not the case in the United States. It is the case in places like Saudi Arabia. Um, it's just the background. Um, Let me see here. This is one-sided. It's my channel. You come onto my channel to ask me questions. The only person you're going to hear is me. I'm not live streaming with someone else right now. I don't know how it's one-sided. You get to say anything you want. You caps rage it, and then nothing you say is actually true. Would you love a hijabi girl? I would love any girl to take away the pain and misery of people being as ignorant as you have been. Um, but you must admit, in Medea, if a Muslim does something, it makes headline news. If a Jewish person does it, it doesn't make it at all. I could give you an example if you like. If a radical Muslim does something, sure. I'm not saying there's not double standards there. Jews commit crimes. Yes, so do Arabs and Muslims. Is it the crime is being committed because of their religious or social beliefs, or is it committed just because they are doing something evil for the sake of evil? Ted Bundy didn't commit crimes because he was a white Christian. Why should or shouldn't the battleship make a comeback? I don't know, really. I can't say one way or another. Don't know enough about it. I think it's too cumbersome and not considered efficient enough in modern warfare. Yeah, bro, but English people focus on English history. Pop culture is not generally asking about Arabic history, which we aren't engaging with as much. Go watch my video on Islamic history. I've talked a lot about Islamic history, Arabic history, all of it. I've written substacks about this stuff. I care about it. Gun violence was way down decades ago until we became a heterogeneous society with relaxed laws. That's another issue that I don't even want to talk about. You didn't. You just say that they believe more so it doesn't equate. Why does it matter what people believe in? If their culture still equates to being more violent, why does it matter? I never said that the Middle East is more violent. I didn't say that. I said radical Islam is violent. And I said radical Islam creates violence. And if you have radical Muslim terrorists who invade countries and kill people there, that doesn't count as homicide rates. Are you aware of the roving bands of extremist Muslim pirates kidnapping and killing Christians in Africa? I've talked about them historically. Are you talking about right now there's some? No, I would not be. It seems like you're living about 500 years ago, but I'm okay with that. It's a history channel. No issue you have in a show. I'm saying you should debate. I have just the person if you have the guts. Well, you're not that person because you haven't been able to actually answer anything I've said. So why aren't you debating me? Yeah, they're always just double standards, unfortunately. Yes, I hate double standards. I call them out all the time, if you haven't noticed. Why does it matter if a crime is done in religious belief or not? You didn't listen to what I said. I said, I'm talking about radical Islam being inherently violent. I know you do, but you asked why people asked that European colonization so much more because we were speaking English. That's true. That's just the problem. Americans know way too little about the history of Europe and painfully less about Africa and Asia. And that's a nascent form of racism that they need to get over with and learn history from all types of the world, of all different areas. You will not learn about the human condition in its totality unless you are willing to learn about histories of people other than yourselves. Do you think it's everyone if they should have the right to protect themselves in a country with nuclear weapons? Because if they don't have another country will come in like the US did to Nicaragua. Are you saying every country should have nuclear weapons? Um, there are countries with nuclear the only country that's ever used nuclear weapons is the United States, and it did so actually effectively ending a world war and probably preventing deaths, believe it or not, by doing so. Nuclear weapons are a deterrent for actual violence. If a country wants nuclear weapons and is willing to, and for this purpose of that, that is a justifiable reason. But again, I've gotten way away from give me a super chat for this nonsense. I don't want to talk about geopolitical issues, religious issues all the time without a super chat. So I'm sorry, Mr. Bill, but I'm cutting you off. Homogeneous societies typically engage in less high risk societal actions. Uh, You don't understand my point, I guess. Your point is if there's a higher homicide rate, then the society is more violent, which is totally plucking it out of its context and a one for one comparison, which is completely unnecessary. Um, no more running. Well, you're the one running. You just said, I'm going to go see if I can do something for you. So enjoy your run, Lions for Lambs. Um, That was one of the historical reasons for anti-Semitism. Yeah, yeah, Jews being spies. Yeah, there are bad Jews in history. Yeah, what a surprise. Go watch the live stream lecture from a few weeks ago. I'm not going to continue this nonsense. You are part of the human condition, as are you. Um, I would love to have tea and crumpets, and you don't have to super chat me. You can just come visit me in the United States. Yes, it's happening currently. Terrorist groups funded with ISIS was at its peak, are targeting Christian schools in Africa, taking women, girls, and killing them. And we never hear about that. So, Mr. Bill, please explain to me why we never hear about that. I don't know if that's true, but yeah. Why should we keep good graces with Britain when they have partitioned Africa and uprooted the Palestinian people to establish Israel? Or the British didn't. It's not that simple. So should we keep good graces with France because they did similar things? Um, the common reason the U.S. and Britain have been allies is a shared language, history, and culture. The United States knows that its politics, its political history comes from the British. Why don't you talk about the Zulu tribe? What do you want to know? Shaka Khan? The Zulus were a powerful, aggressive group of people that took over parts of Africa during the 18th and 19th century. You're using all caps and wasting your time, Lions for Lambs. That's passive aggressive. I'm not miscommunicating. Series is asking if you had to be ruled by one ruler in history. That's a great question, and that's actually a historical question. I think Peter the Great would have been an extremely effective ruler. George Washington come to mind. Edward Longshanks, Elizabeth I. People who can create productive societies. How productive is the society? How much better off was the society by the end of their rule? How different was it in a good way by the end of their rule than opposed to the beginning? That is a great way to judge whether or not that society is worth living under. That's racist. No, it's not racist. America is leveraging anti-Semitism to escape accountability for their war with Iran. Okay, you're entitled to your opinion. I don't want to talk about this stuff. Give a super chat. if you want me to address a geopolitical issue. Fine. Just know it will be public. If you chicken out, I'll see if you can be paid, so there is no reason to back out. I don't need to be paid to debate an issue. I've debated issues with you for free, and I think I won every one of those. But the mask will slip one day, and we will hear your real British accent. Blimey, mate. I'm so looking forward to that. I don't know if that's true either, but if you notice in the narrative of the news media, whatever station, there's one religion pushed more than others, and we all know what that is. Why? Um, um, you didn't answer me. You are ignoring me. There's no religion that's pushed by the media. Um, in fact, I think the media is generally misdirected and more or less is pro secular. What information do you have on General Wolfe's victory at the Plains of Abraham around Quebec? Don't know enough about it. Is that during the Seven Years' War? Is that a British victory against the French? Catherine the Great would be another impressive ruler to rule under, to live under. Bismarck in Germany. Um, I'm trying to think of domestically peaceful monarchs and rulers and presidents. Yeah. I didn't know. I never said I didn't know what swarthy means. I know what swarthy means. Anyways, I'm going to sign off. I've gone 2 hours with all of you. I've answered way more questions than I expected to, dealt with way more nonsense than I expected to. Um, yes, thank you. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. I'm going to sign off. Please like and subscribe on your way out. Um, I appreciate everybody and everything that they have done. Um, yeah, Lions, shut up. Anyways, but goes back. Yeah. In fact, you know what? I'm just absolutely tired of this. There you go. Sorry, Tune. We're just signing off right now. I don't like saying shut up. It's rude, but people just repeat themselves ad nauseum, saying nonsense, and my moderators aren't here anymore for some reason. I'm trying to be as awesome and fair and based, but also as objective as I possibly can be and calling out double standards. If I fail to do that, please let me know how I failed to do that, and I will look at my own biases and problems. People have called me bigots before because they don't know anything about me, um, for propping up the right race. I have no desire to prop up any race but the human race. And the best way to prop up the human race is to get them to learn about their past and understand it and understand who they are and why they are. Um, so I will see you guys all another time. Take care, and we will be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern for the for the live stream lecture, and then a Q&A for members only to follow. Take care. Have a great rest of your day, and as always, love history. Bye bye now.